I am beautiful. I am abundant. I am blessed. I am successful. Positive affirmations have become a popular self help tool, and it often promoted as a simple way to boost your confidence, your motivation, and your overall well being. But from social media posts to morning routines, many people repeat uplifting statements to themselves, just like the ones that I just gave you, in the hope that positive thinking can really reshape how they can feel and act. And to be honest, you go on social media and people say, you know what, these have really worked for me. But psychologists say that the reality is much more complex. Research suggests that affirmations can have benefits, particularly when they reinforce values people already believe about themselves. However, if you're struggling with low self-esteem or you don't particularly click with the values that you're trying to implement through your affirmations, you could actually not be getting the solution and just be following a motivational trend. So today we're speaking to clinical psychologist and psychotherapist and motivational speaker Angela Deh to really find out if there's more to this motivational trend and how we can actually use them to reinforce ourselves positively. Angela, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to chat to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. This is such a nuanced topic, and I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also glad we're speaking about it because, I think years back when I discovered the power of affirmations, I mean, I use some of these on an everyday basis, but there is more behind the screen. We're seeing this on social media. Everyone is promoting affirmations and telling people, look, this works for me. But I think we're learning that life is not a one size fits all. Why isn't positive affirmation something that could work for everyone?
Well, again, it's nuanced, and the research is out there that shows that it does work, but obviously under particular messages. So it's just not always something that can help, and it's not for everyone. They work best when they're believable, they're specific, and when they're paired with action. So, not as a magic spell, but as a gentle nudge towards self compassion and focus. And so, when we talk about it not being for everyone, sometimes it's more about the way that it's being used rather than the tool itself.
I see. And the way that people usually use it is that they will say, a bunch of positive things, like I said right now, in hope that that will be their lived reality. But what are some of the
Mhm.
things mentally or psychologically that are in us that may not have it work as a direct line, but rather a way to actually deal with some of the things that are underlying before we rely on the affirmations?
Let me understand that question a little bit better. Maybe you can
Okay.
just kind of summarize. Yeah.
Perhaps we can speak about what are some of the underlying mental and psychological things about ourselves that we should try and work on first before relying on the positive affirmations.
Well, it comes to a strong sense of self. So often people who have a strong sense of self often don't use affirmations. It's often for people who are in a growth period of self-esteem. People who have a low sense of self-esteem also may not use them effectively. So instead of affirmations being something that's positive for someone with a low self-esteem and creates an incorrect um, affirmation. The affirmation can tend to be invalidating. So when you just, for instance, tell someone who has low self-esteem to just think positive, this actually dismisses their real struggle. And for instance, sometimes if someone has an avoidance, then using affirmations to numb the pain instead of processing it can also be an issue and do harm. And sometimes people self-blame. So if I were stronger, this would work. And when actually in the real world, things are actually very difficult. So maybe even spiritual bypassing. So people use positivity to avoid their accountability or their growth period.
Hmm.
So hope shouldn't come with a guilt tax. That's the essence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's deal with some of these underlying factors. Someone might say, I've been seeing affirmations working for so many people, and they say, hey, this works, and they're showing us how their lives have grown since they started using positive affirmations, but it's just not working for me. What kind of self-introspection should I be doing if I feel like these positive affirmations aren't working for me when they're working for so many other people?
Well, I would start with some practical tips. So, how about we make them actually believable? So, swap out "I'm fearless" for "I can handle hard things." Tie them to your values. So, things like "I am kind," "I show up," "I am learning." That's what we want to do. We want to pair them with action as well. So, I'm building confidence while practicing speaking up. That's a good idea, for pairing it with action, and use them to soften and not to silence your voice. So say to yourself, this is tough and I'm still here. Drop them when they actually don't fit, when they're not believable. It's okay to say, today I just need to feel. Yeah. So affirmations, they don't change your reality, but they can change your relationship with reality. You don't need to vibe higher to be worthy. You're already enough. And yeah, you're mess and all. So
I
yeah.
love that. And I think that is the affirmation that many should begin with, right? I am enough. Before the aspiration of everything that we want to be, we need to realize that we are more than enough just as we are. But as we move forward in this conversation, aren't positive affirmations supposed to also be aspirational? So a lot of people say, hey, you're supposed to use them as a method to also manifest. So if I'm making them just believable for the life that I live today, I may not be aspiring enough to the things that I want for myself tomorrow.
Again, they should be believable, So while we want to look into the future, um, part of the challenge is that by looking too far into the future, living too far in fantasy that's not connected to your grounded reality, we stand the danger again of toxic positivity, so to speak. Yeah. And toxic positivity is literally that space of, I have to be good, I should be this, I should be that. And you should just be who you are. That's why we're humans busy being,
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
often overlook that experience and we think we should be more. I mean, those messages are in social media so often, but we need to really ground ourselves. And that really is the point of a positive affirmation.
Yeah. All right, Angela, let's take a break. We will come back after our break and continue with this conversation. But I am really interested to find out from you at home whether you use positive affirmations. What are some of the positive affirmations that you use on a daily, on a weekly basis, or however long that you implement them? Have they worked for you? And have you seen results from your positive affirmations? And even if you're someone on the other side who says, I tried them, they're not quite for me, they didn't work, what are some of the underlying conversations that you perhaps need to have with yourself as we continue to get more real expert advice from Angela Deh after this break?
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Téléchargez l'application Channel Africa sur votre Play Store ou Apple Store afin de pouvoir suivre toutes nos émissions en direct de là où vous vous trouvez. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
We're having a conversation about positive affirmations. It is a beautiful tool, right? A beautiful self-help tool. But we're speaking to Angela Deh, who's a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, and motivational speaker, about how to actually use this in a way that is believable to you and can be impactful. We're also navigating some of the nuances of positive affirmation. Angela, usually we find ourselves being more compassionate with other people than we are with
Mm.
ourselves. When we see someone who's struggling, we're like, don't worry, everything is going to be okay. But we're so much more harsh with ourselves internally. And a conversation about affirmations is really about how you speak to yourself. So let's start with
Mm.
being compassionate. How do we try and cultivate more self compassion before we start navigating the affirmation?
Well, for someone who finds affirmations fake or unhelpful, maybe something like, I'm struggling right now, and that's human. So to speak to yourself in that way, it doesn't require you to feel good. It just requires you to be kind. And research shows that self-compassion is often more effective than this forced positivity.
Mm. Yeah. Is it forced? I mean, some people will say maybe forcing yourself into positivity will eventually get your mindset in the right headspace. Because sometimes we dwell so deeply within the negative and the things that are going wrong in our lives. What is the right way to use this tool?
Again, the way is to be present minded, you don't want to force things. Again, that's a space of toxic positivity. So what we really want to do is to just not go about thinking positive. Everything doesn't have to be positive. Things can be not okay. And we don't want to dismiss the pain that you're feeling. And worse, if the affirmations don't work, then people tend to blame themselves. So they'll say, I'm not strong enough, or that's the opposite of your healing process. So for people who are not quite sure how to use them, I would say that really you want to just sit presently with what you're doing, you want to make them believable and you want to tie them in with your values. That's very important. Sometimes people are not aware of what their value systems are, but often maybe you can reflect on what is something you truly value is when you have a lot of thoughts around it. Say, for instance, if you're in a partnership with a husband or a boyfriend or somebody, and you find yourself dwelling on a particular aspect of the relationship, that's something you value. So these positive affirmations should be tied to your value system. And to make them actually occur, you need to pair it with action.
Mm.
It cannot be that it's just something you say, I am wealthy, you know.
Yeah.
At this time I'm becoming wealthy. My actions, my behaviors, my thoughts are leading me towards my best outcomes. Just that's more believable than I am wealthy. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. As we move, well, with closing, how important is it to be flexible and to have a constant conversation? Because a lot of the times when we want to try something with ourselves, let's say, affirmations in light of this conversation, we want to try it once in one particular way. We force ourselves to do it in one particular way, and then we say, no, it's not working. So is there a need for that flexibility and constant conversation with yourself to try and, change, to regulate, to, sort of move over and check what's not working? Let me do this instead. Is that constant conversation as important as just the affirmation itself?
I think in addition to regular check-ins with yourself, it comes back, like you noted before, self-compassion. Speaking to yourself is the way you speak to yourself. I think a good barometer can sometimes be, how would I speak to a 6-year-old child? Would it be appropriate the way that I'm speaking to myself with the same language that I'm using with myself? Would that be okay for me to speak that way to a very good friend? Would it be okay with me to speak that way to a small child? And having that self-compassion for yourself, one will then go on to say, I don't have to be okay to be worthy. you know it
Yeah.
gives space for this pain and doubt, and so that's again where the real growth begins, is accepting the self and your humanity, um And while it's important to have these affirmations, they need to be realistic. They need to be almost like when you're making smart goals, they need to be
Yes.
tied to your value system. They need to be actionable. So again and again, those are the things that I would say that needs to be important. And moving away from self-blame, moving away from this toxic positivity. Yeah. And then drop them when they don't fit. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I love that.
Dr- yeah. Today I just need to feel. So don't bypass your pain. You need to befriend your progress. That's important.
Yeah. All right, Angela, let's talk about social media because, I mean, it's been a great platform to share information, to have more of us sort of hear from someone else saying, hey, you know what has helped me? Positive affirmation. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try that. What is the pinch of salt that you should be taking with that kind of advice online?
Well, social media actually amplifies some of the fears and things that we have. So, social media, when these sound bites are like 7 seconds or so, they're catchy, they're shareable, and we feel empowered in the moment. So the key word is in the moment. That doesn't necessarily make for a long-term growth. Through these things, the pinch of salt is really looking at that we crave hope and control, and especially when we're in stressful situations, especially when things feel uncertain. Affirmations feel accessible. There are no cost, there's no barriers to them. And so they tap into our brain's reward system. So the dopamine hit, this something is positive and it can just boost my mood in the moment. Again, we want to make sure that they're believable, they're specific, and they're paired with action. So it's not a magic spell. Yeah.
It's not a magic spell. I think I love that we keep getting to that because many of us have been using it like a magic spell without really introspecting what are the kind of things or the limiting beliefs that we also have with ourselves that
Mhm.
really aren't allowing us to connect with just the affirmations. But we'll leave it there. Angela, thank you so much for your time this morning. Where can we go to find you?
You can find me at www.adcp, Angela Day, clinical psychologist, adcp.coza.
Thank you so much. That's Angela Deh, clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, and motivational speaker. What are some of your favorite positive affirmations? Are they working? Of course, according to what Angela was saying, are they realistic to you? What are the nuances that you have noticed about yourself through these positive affirmations? And if you feel like they just didn't quite work for you and you're listening to the conversation I just had with Angela Deh, do you think that you're going to try sort of a more nuanced way to interact with these positive affirmations, making sure that they are realistic and they align with your values and they're not just a magic spell, just like Angela has reminded us. Let us know on our WhatsApp line, +2783 288 6684. Well, let's move on and get our latest in sports.